You're the cook. The Reed baby won't eat. She's going blue.
I'm the cook. Take me to her.
Come quick, please, she's gone quiet.
How long since she took the breast?
3 days. They told her to wait. In here. Nobody knew what to do.
Warm water and a lamp. Somebody does now.
The train left her standing in snow past her ankles, and the platform at Two Rivers was as empty as a swept plate. Susanna set down her one carpet bag and waited for someone to come, the way a woman waits when she has spent her last $3 on a ticket to a place that never answered her letter. Wind came off the mountains and found every seam in her coat. Then a boy came running from the direction of the church, hatless, his breath tearing white, and he did not slow when he reached her. He looked up at her broad face and her wide, steady hands, and he said the only words that mattered. "You're the cook. Please, the Reed baby won't eat, and she's going blue." Susanna did not correct him. She was the cook. She had been a saloon cook in Cold Springs until the town decided a woman her size and her history was a thing to be shamed out the back door by lamplight. But her mother had been a midwife, and her mother's mother, and there are things the hands remember that the town never asks about. She picked up her bag. "Take me," she said, and the boy turned and ran. And she went after him through snow that squeaked underfoot, past faces that came to frosted windows to watch the strange, heavy woman half run down the only street they had. The Reed house sat low behind a broken gate. Inside it was too hot and it smelled of tallow and fear. A young mother lay gray against the pillows, and by the stove, a woman in an apron held a bundle that was not crying, and a baby that does not cry is the worst sound in the world. Susanna crossed the room without asking leave. She put back the blanket and looked at the small blue face, the slack mouth, the little chest working too fast for the little belly, and she understood at once that no one here had known what she knew. "She latches and lets go," the mother whispered. "She won't hold. 3 days now." The midwife rode to the coolie berth and the pass closed behind her. Her voice cracked on the last word. "They said wait. They said some just don't take. Some don't," Susanna said, low, already rolling her sleeves. "This one will." She did not know that. "But you do not hand a drowning woman your doubt." She warmed her hands at the stove until they hurt, because cold hands frighten a failing child. And then she took the baby and felt along the small jaw and under the tongue with one clean finger, and she found what she was looking for, a tie of skin knotting the tongue to the floor of the mouth, so the child could not draw and hold. A thing the size of a thread, a thing that was killing her. "I need boiled thread, the sharpest small scissors in the house, and a lamp brought close." Nobody moved. She lifted her eyes, and there was iron in them, the quiet iron of a woman who has been doubted her whole life and is done waiting for permission. "Now," she said, and the room jumped to obey. What followed was a minute that felt like an hour. She worked by lamplight with the mother's hand crushed in the apron woman's grip, and she was quick because slow is cruel, and there was the smallest release and one thin, furious wail, the first sound that child had made in a day. And then Susanna put the baby to the breast and held the small head at the angle her grandmother had taught her at 8 years old. The room held its breath, and then everyone in it saw the tiny throat begin to work. Swallow, and pause, and swallow. The small hand that had lain open closed against her mother's skin. Alma Reed was eating. The mother wept without any sound at all, only water running sideways off her face into her hair, and the apron woman, whose name was Della, and who ran the mercantile and half the gossip in the county, sat down hard on a kitchen chair, as though her strings were cut. Nobody said the words "thank you." They said something better, which is nothing. The ringing nothing of people who have watched a life turn back from a door. Susanna kept her eyes on the baby's throat, and let her own hands shake now that no one needed them steady. It was full dark when she stepped out onto the Reed porch, and that was where she first saw him. A big man stood at the bottom of the raw pine steps with a lantern. A girl of perhaps 9 pressed to his side, and he did not come up. He only looked at Susanna the way you look at weather you cannot read. Down one side of his jaw and neck ran an old burn, pale and puckered, the mark of scalding water long healed. The girl stared up with a hunger that had nothing to do with supper. "Is the baby going to live?" the girl asked, and it was not quite a question. It was a thing she needed to hold. "She's eating," Susanna said. "That's how you know." The man touched the girl's shoulder. "Come away, Tess. Let the woman be." His voice was gravel dragged over gravel. But the girl did not come away at once, and in that half second, Susanna saw a whole household in the two of them. The too old child, the father who spoke in short chords of words, the shape of a woman missing from the space between them. Then boots sounded on the frozen street, and a lean man with a tin star pinned crooked on his coat came into the lantern light, and the temperature of the porch dropped 10 degrees though the wind had died.
"Sheriff,"
the big man said, flat. "Deacons told me the stranger fixed the Reed child." The sheriff, his name was Pruitt, looked Susanna over slow, from her snow-crusted hem to her wide, plain face, and made no effort to hide the ledger running behind his eyes. "You'd be the woman come off the noon train. No family here. No husband." He said it as a finding, not a question. "We keep an ordinance in Two Rivers, ma'am. An unwed woman of no visible household don't settle inside the town line without she's spoken for. Keeps things orderly." He let his gaze drift once more, and his mouth did something that was not a smile. "And I'll be honest with you, so you don't waste your hopes. No man in this valley is like to marry a woman like you, so you'll want to think hard about the morning train. There are cruelties that strike, and cruelties that simply state. His was the second kind, and it was worse." Susanna felt the old heat climb her neck, the heat of every kitchen door she had been shown, and she reached down inside herself and found the thing she had learned to stand on. She looked the sheriff full in the face. "I've been told to move along by better men than you, Sheriff, and I'm still here, still working." She drew her coat closed. "That child ate tonight because I stayed. You can start your clock on me tomorrow. I'll be too busy to hear it." And she went down the raw pine steps past the big man and his daughter, and the girl watched her go the whole way down the street. She took a room over the mercantile because Della would not hear otherwise. A narrow, cold room with a stovepipe running up through it, and Della, ashamed of her town and grateful past speaking, gave her the run of the shop kitchen to cook against her rent. That was where Susanna found the tin, an old flour tin at the back of a shelf, dented, and on its side in a woman's careful pencil hand were the words "Reed, sift twice." Della saw her holding it and went quiet. "Rachel Reed," she said, "Josiah's wife. She used to bake for the church suppers, died 2 winters back, and there wasn't a soul at that grave who wasn't wet-eyed." Della took the tin gently, as you'd take a photograph. "He hasn't been to a supper since, keeps that girl and that ranch and himself, and lets nobody near. You met him tonight, on the steps." So that was the man with the burn. Susanna said nothing, but she thought about the space between the father and the child, and she understood it a little better. Grief does not always make people soft. Sometimes it makes them a locked room with someone small still living inside it. Winter closed its fist on Two Rivers, and Susanna worked. She cooked, she rendered, she put up what the frost had spared. And because a woman who saves a baby cannot be entirely unseen, she was sent for. A teamster's wife too far along and turned wrong. A widow's grandchild with croup at 2 in the morning, and Susanna warmed camphor flannel on the stove lid and laid it steaming to the small chest, and stayed till the whistle went out of the breathing. She asked for coins when there were coins, and for nothing when there were none, and she wrote every call in a school copybook, because her grandmother had taught her that a record is a woman's only witness, in a place that would rather forget her. The town paid her in eggs and in half-thawed civility, and, under it all, in the old cold current of "we know what you were." Josiah Reed came to the mercantile on the 9th day, on a pretext of nails, and stood too long by the counter. Susanna, wiping down the kitchen board, watched him work himself up to it like a man wading into a river in his boots. Finally, he set his hat on the counter. "You saved my brother's child," he said. "Alma, my brother's." Up the North Fork. That was reed blood you kept in the world. He turned the hat a quarter turn. I heard your woodpile's low and your fence is down behind the shop. I've a strong back going spare, and a girl who's asked about you 9 times in 9 days. He met her eyes with difficulty. I'd haul your wood and set your rails. It's a small thing. It was not a small thing, and they both knew it, and that was exactly why Susanna set down her rag and squared herself to him. She had learned this lesson in a saloon yard, with a man who thought firewood was a down payment. I'll say something plain, Mr. Reed, and I'll only say it the once. Her voice was even and low. You may haul my wood and mend my fence, and I'll be grateful, and I'll feed you for it. But helping buys no claim. Not on my ground, not on my work, and not on me. The day you act as though it does, the day you decide my thank you was a promise, you're gone before you finish the sentence. Are we understood? Something moved behind his weathered face, and to her surprise it was not offense. It was something closer to relief, the look of a man handed a boundary he could trust. Understood, he said. I don't buy people. I couldn't afford the one I had. He picked up his hat. Rachel, he added, as if the name cost him a tooth, and did not finish, and left. He came Saturdays after that, and the girl came with him. Josiah split and stacked and dug post holes in ground like iron, and said perhaps 20 words an afternoon, and Susanna did not fill his silences, because she had her own and respected his. It was Tess who built the bridge. Tess who followed her into the kitchen and asked what the camphor was for, and how you know a baby's tie from a baby's temper, and whether it was true Susanna could bake bread that didn't sink. My mother could, Tess said, and looked at the floor. I don't remember the taste. Just that everybody said so. Susanna's chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Then we'll find out together, Susanna said, whether I can hold a candle to her. And she pulled the dented tin from the shelf without saying whose hand was on it. She let Tess sift the flour twice, exactly twice, and did not explain why, and when the loaf came out high and brown, the girl broke the heel off hot and ate it standing at the window, and something in the set of her thin shoulders eased. In the yard, Josiah stopped his axe and watched his daughter through the frost on the glass, and Susanna watched him watch, and none of them said one word about any of it. The town noticed, because towns are made of noticing. Della warned her kindly over the account book. Pruitt's asking around, wants to know, does Josiah Reed speak for you now, so he can call the ordinance satisfied, or call it broke? He don't much care which, long as he's the one holding the pen. She lowered her voice. He's an ambitious man, Susanna. There's a seat on the county board come spring, and nothing gets a nervous town to the polls like a man who tidied up a woman they weren't sure of. The test came at the Mercantile on a bright, hard Tuesday, with half the town in earshot buying against the next storm. Pruitt planted himself by the stove and addressed Josiah as though Susanna were a fence post between them. Read, I'll enter it that you speak for the woman and stand her household, and will say the ordinance is met. Save us all a proceeding. He had his little book open already, pencil wet at his lip. Josiah set down the sack of meal he was carrying. The store went quiet the way a room does when it smells a reckoning. You'll enter no such thing, Josiah said, and his gravel voice carried to the door. I don't speak for her. No man does. She speaks for herself, and she's better at it than you or me. He picked the sack back up. Write that down, if you're writing. Pruitt's face went the color of tallow. To be corrected was one thing. To be corrected in front of the voters he meant to court was another. He shut his book with a snap. Then the ordinance is not met, he said, and there'll be a proceeding after all. He put on his hat and left, and the bell over the door jangled too long in the silence. Susanna stood very still by the flour bins, and what moved in her was not fear, though there was fear. It was the strange warmth of a man who had just made his own life harder rather than let her be spoken for like livestock. If you are looking for a story that treats women like Susanna as people worth keeping, you have found the right fireside, and I am glad you are here. Stay with me, because what these two carried was heavier than either could set down alone. That night, walking her home along the frozen street, Josiah broke his own record for words. "I should tell you why I'm careful," he said, eyes ahead. "So you don't take it for coldness." They stopped under the mercantile eaves. The burn. He touched his jaw without seeming to know he did it. Kettle came off the crane the morning Rachel took sick. I caught it off the stove so it wouldn't scald her where she lay. Held it wrong. She watched me do it and couldn't rise to help, and she died 4 days after. And the last clear thing she said to me was that I was to let people close after, and not go and turn myself to stone. He breathed out. I turned myself to stone anyway. It was easier than the other thing. Susanna looked at the pale scar and thought of every burn she had taken from every kettle in every kitchen that used her, and forgot her. And she said the truest thing she had. "Stone doesn't grieve," she said. "It just doesn't feel the digging." But a thing buried alive keeps digging, Josiah. It comes up. It always comes up. He looked at her then, really looked, and for one breath his hand rose from his side toward hers where it rested on the cold rail, and stopped, a finger's width short, because he was a man who kept his word about claims. She let it stop. But she did not move her hand away, and they stood in the cold with that inch between them like the last coal in a banked fire, saying nothing, feeling everything. The proceeding did not come at once, because Pruitt was a patient man, and a storm rolled in, and the pass filled, and the town turned inward to the business of not freezing. Susanna cooked and doctored, and Tess learned to sift twice, and Josiah's axe rang in her yard on Saturdays, and the inch between two hands stayed an inch, honored, unspoken, growing warmer by the week. Once, hanging camphor flannel to warm on the stove lid, she caught herself humming, and stopped, startled, because she could not remember the last time her body had felt safe enough to make music without being asked. It was Alma who forced the question, months on. The Reed baby, thriving now, took a winter fever in the night, and they carried her down the North Fork to Susanna's kitchen because there was nowhere else to carry her. All that long, dark Susanna and Josiah worked over the child by turns, cool cloths and warm flannel, and the terrible arithmetic of a fever that will not break. Near 3 a.m, spent past speech, Susanna felt the baby's forehead go from fire to dew under her palm, and she looked up to say she's turned and found Josiah already looking at her, and neither of them said the child's name. He reached across the cradle and took her hand, took it, held it, work-rough fingers folding over her wide, capable ones, and this time he did not stop an inch short, and this time she did not want him to. "I know your rule," he said, hoarse. "Helping buys no claim. I've kept it. I'll keep it till I die." His thumb moved once across her knuckles. "This isn't a claim, Susanna. This is asking. There's a difference, and I finally learned it. I'm asking." She should have been able to answer. She had answered every hard thing in her life plainly. But her whole grown existence had taught her that a woman like her was rent to be paid daily, tolerated for her hands and her cooking and her use, kept only as long as she was useful, and shown the door the hour she cost more than she earned. To be asked, not needed, not used, asked, was a country she had no map for, and it frightened her more than any sheriff. She drew her hand back, gently, and saw the hurt flare and school itself in his face. "Not because I don't," she said, "because I've never once been kept for myself, and I don't know how to believe I'd be the first." She turned to the sleeping child so he would not see her eyes. "Ask me again when it costs you something. Then I'll know." The strangest kindness came from the one direction she never looked for it. Pruitt found her at the mercantile counter on a soft, thawing afternoon, with Della weighing coffee 3 feet away, and he took off his hat, which he had never once done in her presence. "I've been wrong about you," he said, and the words came out smooth as poured cream. "The town's had its say, and I've heard it. I'm dropping the complaint. There'll be no proceeding. You've earned your place, and I'll not be the man standing in the door of it." He laid his hand flat on the counter, as if swearing on the wood. "You can rest now, ma'am. It's finished." Susanna searched his face for the trick and did not find it, because a good liar keeps the trick behind his teeth. She let herself believe him, and that was the part she would be angriest at later. Not that he lied, but that she had wanted so badly to lay the fear down that she took his word and slept that whole night through, deep and dreamless, the first unbroken sleep she'd had since the noon train. She woke light for the first time in a month. She hummed at the stove and did not stop herself. She let Tess sift twice and laughed when the girl scowled at the loaf, and she began, in the small hours, to believe she might one day answer Josiah the way her whole heart wanted to answer him. The betrayal announced itself on the church door, 9 days after Pruitt had stood hat in hand at that counter and told her to rest. A notice went up in his own square hand. The proceeding would be held after all. Susanna read it twice in the cold, and felt the fear she had finally laid down come back into her chest, like a draft under a door. She did not yet know the worst of it, that he had signed and sworn his second complaint the same afternoon he told her she was safe. She only knew the smooth words had been a lie, and that a man who could lie that gently would be hard to stop. He chose the church for the hearing, which was clever, because the church board sat as the town's conscience, and the church steps were where the whole valley could gather to watch. On a raw, bright morning, the town filled the pews and lined the walls, and Susanna stood at the front in her one good dress with her copybook against her chest, and Pruitt read the ordinance aloud in a voice pitched for a campaign. An unwed woman of no established household, he said, unspoken for, of a prior character. And he let prior character hang in the air like smoke, so that everyone smelled Cold Springs. Cannot lawfully settle within the town line. I move the board to require Susanna to remove herself by the spring thaw. The board of 5 men shifted in their chairs, and the town murmured, and for a moment the old current ran strong and cold, and Susanna felt herself become again the woman shown the back door by lamplight. Then a horse came hard up the street outside, and the doors banged open, and the midwife walked in with snow on her shoulders and her jaw set like a trap. Her name was Hetty Vane, and she had ridden through the closed pass to be there. She did not wait to be called. She walked to the front and set a fat leather ledger on the rail before the board. 112 births, Hetty said, and struck the cover with 2 fingers. That's my count in this county across 19 years, and it's in this book. Mothers and dates and outcomes, and I'll swear to every line. In 19 years I have lost mothers, and I have lost babes, because God and the winter get their share. She turned and looked at Pruitt without any love at all. The Reed child on the North Fork was 3 days from the grave, with a tongue tie none of us caught, and I was iced out beyond the coulee. And if this woman had removed herself by the noon train, like the sheriff advised her to on the very night she came, that child would be under the snow right now. I have delivered this valley for 19 years. I am telling the board I want her. Write that in your book, Pruitt. She sat, and the murmur of the town had changed its temperature entirely. Then Della rose without being asked, red to the ears but steady, holding Susanna's copybook and a fistful of the mercantile's own receipts. I'll speak to established household, Della said. This woman has paid her rent every week, in cash or in labor. Here's the account. She's provisioned 4 families through the storm at her own cost. Here's the record. She's been sent for 11 times to sickbeds and croup and hard birthings. All wrote down the day it happened, in her hand. Because she's the only soul in this town careful enough to keep the receipts the sheriff now says she can't produce. Della set the papers on the rail beside Hetty's ledger. There's your household. It's the whole county. Half of you in these pews are in this book. And then Josiah stood, and the room went truly still, because everyone knew what it would cost the most private man in the valley to speak in it. He turned his scarred jaw to the light without hiding it. You all know I've kept to myself since I buried Rachel. You've let me, and I thank you for it. He looked at the board, and then at the pews, at neighbors and buyers and men he'd owe money to, and men who owed him. I split this woman's wood, and I mended her fence, and before she'd let me lift a finger, she told me plain that helping bought no claim on her, not her ground, not her work, not her person, and that if I ever forgot it, I'd be gone before I finished the sentence. A low sound went through the church. You want to talk about character? I have never in my life met a character straighter than that. She asked nothing and earned everything. And I'll say in front of all of you and the board and God, that I'd be proud past speaking to have her name next to mine, if she'll have me, which is her choosing and no man's, least of all his. He nodded once at Pruitt and sat, and did not look to see who was staring. Susanna's throat closed, but there was one more thing, and it was hers to place, and she stepped to the rail and opened her copybook to a page she had marked with a straw. "The board should have one more fact," she said, and her voice did not shake, because she had spent her whole life learning to keep it from shaking. 9 days ago, the sheriff came to me at the Mercantile and told me, in front of Della Hess, that he'd been wrong about me, that he was dropping the complaint, that it was finished, and I could rest. She heard the small intake of breath around the room. Some of them had heard him say it. I believed him. I slept a whole night through for the first time in a month. She looked up from the book, straight at Pruitt, and now she let them see the iron. "This is the second complaint. It's dated. He signed and swore it before this board, the same afternoon he stood in that store and told me I was safe. Della saw the one. The board's own clerk holds the other. Same day. Read the dates yourself, gentlemen. That's not a man enforcing an ordinance. That's a man hunting a woman for a chair on the county board come spring, and telling her she was safe so she'd stop packing." The clerk, a mild man who had not enjoyed his morning, turned 2 pages, went pale, and read the 2 dates aloud without being asked to, because the truth once loose has a will of its own. And the church, which had come to watch a shamed woman shown the door, turned as one body and looked at its sheriff. Pruitt stood in a silence you could have leaned a ladder against. He opened his mouth and found nothing in it worth saying, and shut it. The chairman of the board did not even call a vote. He simply took up his pen, drew one long line through the complaint, and said, "The board finds no cause. The matter's dismissed. And Pruitt, the board will have a separate word with you about the 2 dates." Somewhere in the back, a woman began to clap, and it caught and rolled, and Susanna stood at the rail with her copybook against her chest and let the sound break over her like the first warm rain of a year. Outside on the church steps, the town flowed past her in a river of hands and half apologies, and the sudden ferocious kindness of people, ashamed of who they'd nearly been. Tess reached her first and drove her thin arms around Susanna's middle and held on, and Alma's mother pressed her wet face to Susanna's shoulder, and Hetty Vane gripped her hand once, hard, like one workman to another, and said, "You keep that copybook till you die," and went to see to her horse. And then the crowd thinned, and Josiah was standing at the bottom of the raw pine steps, with his hat in his 2 hands, in exactly the place he had stood the first night, when the baby would not eat, and the world had told her to move along. "It cost me something," he said. "In there, my standing, my privacy, the good opinion of a couple of men I do business with. You told me to ask again when it cost me something." He came up 1 step, careful, keeping to his word about claims even now. "So I'm asking, Susanna, not because you're useful, though God knows you are. Not because Tess needs a mother, though she'd walk to Helena for you. I'm asking because I want you, your stubborn straight back and your 2 good hands, and the sound you make humming when you think nobody hears. I want to keep you, not as rent, as my wife. Will you have me?" And here is the thing Susanna finally understood, standing on those cold steps with the whole watching town gone soft around them. She had spent her life believing worth was a thing you paid out daily, and could always run short on. That a woman like her had to earn her place at every dawn, or lose it by dark. But that was the lie the Cold Springs door had taught her, and the lie the sheriff had tried to make law. The midwife had ridden a closed pass for her. Della had emptied her ledger for her. This town had clapped for her, and this man was asking to keep her, not for what her hands could do, but for the whole plain fact of her. Worth was not the rent. Worth was the woman. It had been there in her all along, the way it is in every soul, whether the town sees it or not. Not earned, not owed, simply is. "Yes," she said, and it came out steady and sure, and lit from within. "Yes, Josiah, ask me every morning if you like. But I'll tell you now, the answer won't change." He came up the last steps and took both her hands in both of his, and did not stop an inch short. and the burn on his jaw was in the sun, and she reached up without a thought and laid her wide, warm palm against it, and he closed his eyes like a man setting down a weight he'd carried 2 winters. Tess crowded in against them both, and someone in the crowd laughed for pure gladness, and the church bell, which nobody had rung, gave one long note as the wind caught the rope. They were married on those same steps when the thaw came, because Susanna would not be married anywhere she could not see the sky. She wore no veil and carried Rachel's flower tin under her arm like a thing that belonged at the ceremony, because it did. Because a good woman had once asked her man to let people close, and this was the keeping of that promise. And Susanna would not pretend the first wife out of the story to make room for herself. There was room. There is always more room than a grieving heart believes. Tess held the tin during the vows and cried and did not know why. And afterward the whole valley ate bread that had been sifted twice, and Hetty Vane stood up at the supper and made everyone drink to the copybook. They lived a long, plain life on the North Fork after that, and it was not a life without cost, because no true one is. There were hard winters and a lean year, and the low grief that never entirely leaves a house that has buried someone. But there were loud suppers again, and church socials where Josiah came and stayed, and even, twice, laughed out loud in front of God and everyone. There were babies caught in the dark by Susanna's 2 good hands, and written down the same night in the copybook, more than she could count, until her count crept past Hetty's own. And there was Tess, grown tall and stubborn and kind, who learned every birth trick her second mother knew, and who kept the dented flower tin on her own shelf when the time came, with 2 women's careful pencil now upon it. I have carried this story a long way to hand it to you across the fire, and I hope it warms the same cold place in you it warms in me, because the world will try to tell you what the sheriff told Susanna in the snow, that your worth is a rent you must scramble to pay, and that some people simply owe more for the privilege of being kept. Do not believe it. Worth is not earned and cannot be lost, not by a hard past, not by an unfashionable body, not by a town that looks away. It simply is, in you, right now, whole. These stories are made with love. If this one stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and sit with me again by the next fire. That is all I ask.